All right, 10 reasons that you should go tiny.
Hi everybody, my name is Desiree. I live and work in Atlanta, but I have a tiny house in the Appalachian Mountains where I'm slowly starting an off-grid farm. I'm a single girl doing most of the work on my own and learning as I go. So come along with me on my journey and I hope it will entertain and maybe also give someone out there a little inspiration. Welcome to Honeysuckle Homestead Retreat.
All right, 10 reasons that you should go tiny. Number 1, less house, less maintenance. So the smaller the house you have, the less maintenance you're going to have on it. Just roofing, for example. Let's say you have to replace the roof on your house. When you live in a 10 by 16 home, the amount of roofing you're going to have to replace is minimal. It could be done in a day, maybe even less. Now, if you live in a 4,000 square foot home, you're going to have to hire roofers. You're going to have to pay a lot of money. It's going to take a long time to do. Well, maybe not, depending on the roofer. It is going to be more time consuming and more costly, and you probably couldn't do it yourself. Whether you do it yourself on your tiny house or not is totally up to you. I personally am not one for height. When it comes time, I'm probably not going to replace this roof myself. I will have someone else do it for me. Just because I don't want to fall off that roof. Unless I have some amazing scaffolding in place, I'm probably not going to do it myself. With that said, it won't cost much to replace that roof. And then other maintenance would be siding. Let's say if you want to paint your tiny home, it's a lot less time consuming and a lot less paint to paint a tiny home than it is to paint a full-size home. Like, as my mom would say, a real home. The maintenance is going to be much easier on a tiny house like this, and you may feel less overwhelmed as a DIY person to actually do projects on your own because the space is so tiny. I know that for me personally, having a smaller space has given me some more confidence of doing projects on my own. For example, building this deck that I built. Number 2, cost of the home in general. Did you know that the current median home price right now is over $400,000? Now that's the median price. Of course, you can get homes that are less than that. But to put that into perspective, I spent about $49,000 on this home. A tiny home can be more affordable. Can it be more expensive? Sure. More expensive than $400,000, I'm not sure about that. But yes, you can put a lot of bells and whistles on a tiny home that will make it cost a lot more. And maybe even make it cost closer to an average home. I still don't know about $400,000 though. Depending on where you get the home, you can get it for a very reasonable price. Like I said, I got my home from Incredible Tiny Homes because I felt like they were super reasonable in their pricing, and that is the reason I chose to go with them. Like, for example, right now, Incredible Tiny Homes, their Incredibox model is only $20,000. That is an 8 by 16 home. Mine's 10 by 16, so it's not much bigger than that. So you could get a tiny home for $20,000. Compared to a $400,000 home, I mean, that's just mind-blowing to me. That is another reason to go tiny. Number 3, this all ties in together. Energy cost. The smaller your home, the less it's going to cost to heat and cool your home. At 160 square feet, it doesn't take long at all for me to heat up the home or to cool it down. And that's definitely going to save you on energy costs. Most of your energy costs, electricity costs, come from heating and cooling your home. After that, it would be like running appliances. But if you choose to go off-grid, you could actually run a lot of your appliances off of propane, or you could have solar panels and save even more on energy costs over the lifetime of the panels, of course. It is a big upfront fee. Trust me, I know. But once you've paid it, it's savings from here on out. Number 4, you can get out of debt sooner. So if you are able to buy a tiny home and it is paid off, you spend $20,000 on it, let's just say, or what I spent, $49,000, and it's completely paid off. And let's say you also have your own property to put it on. You can get out of debt so much faster because you're not spending money on living expenses like rent. I am not fully living in my tiny home yet. As most of you know that follow my channel, I currently live in Atlanta and I do rent an apartment there. So I do not own a home in Atlanta either. But my rent currently is around, with my utilities, is around $1,600 a month. And that is a heavy chunk of change to come out of your pocket every single month. If you can imagine, if I were living in my tiny home, then I would be saving $1,600 a month. What is that a year? Wow. Wow, that is a lot of money just for my living expenses. That's insane. That's how much I could be saving if I just lived in my tiny home. Whole other reasons of why I'm not living in it yet, but that is not what this episode's about. Number 5, if you get a small enough tiny home, you can travel with it and live in multiple states. You could decide, I want to live in Colorado for a year and do that. And then you can say, you know what, I think I want to go live in Nevada for a year, or California, or wherever, as long as you can find a place to park your tiny home. And there are some RV parks that will accept them, and then there are also tiny home communities that are popping up all across the nation. As long as you can find a place to park it, you can move and have different scenery. Now, this would only really apply to people that work from home or are retired. If you're able to do that, hey, more power to you. Some people like living that nomad lifestyle, and if that is the case, then a tiny home is perfect for you. So for me, a tiny home is a lot more comfortable than an RV, because yes, an RV is something that you can travel with just the same, but it doesn't have that same home feeling that a tiny home has. The more comfortable you feel in your home, the better. And that leads us to number 6. You can customize your tiny home. Depending on where you buy it from, or if you choose to build it yourself, which a lot of people do, you can completely customize your tiny home. The tiny home that I had built, I did the layout the way I wanted it. I designed most of it. I wanted an L-shaped kitchen. I wanted the bathroom a certain way. I wanted stairs. I wanted the live trim on the edges of my exterior, all on the trim out there. So and I wanted the big windows. That was a huge thing for me. I wanted the big windows. There were just certain things that I wanted for this tiny house. And if you want to see the process of me having my tiny house built, there will be a link to the video that I did of that in the description below. So you can check that out. It's just called The Process of Having My Tiny Home Built. So I designed it myself, and then I had Incredible Tiny Homes build it. At the time of creating this video, I don't believe Incredible Tiny Homes is currently doing any more custom designs, at least not at the moment. They have their own designs now, their own line of designs that you can choose from. You would have to check with them if they would be willing to do custom. The thing about custom is you are going to spend more money on a custom home than you would on a model home that a company has already built. So that is also something to keep in mind when buying a tiny home. I definitely wanted to design it myself, and so I did. Number 7. If you're concerned about the environment, you may want to go tiny. If you think about it, a tiny house, you're going to have a smaller carbon footprint, as they say. You're going to use a lot less energy. You can also go off-grid a lot easier. Because it is a smaller home, you may not need to have as many solar panels because you won't need as much energy to heat and cool the home, for example. You can also have a composting toilet, which is much better for the environment than septic or sewage. You can do rainwater collection. But not only that, if you're a big nature lover, having a tiny home, especially on your own land, you get that much closer with nature. I spend way more time outside of my home than I do inside of my home. I plan on building an even bigger deck space here so I can have an even more outdoor space to have guests over perhaps, or just to enjoy myself. If you're a nature lover or an outdoors person, or you're concerned about the environment, going tiny is an excellent idea. Number 8, another reason to go tiny is to declutter your life. So when you go tiny, you do have to downsize. And I mentioned in my previous video of reasons why not to go tiny, is that if you have a lot of stuff and you just can't part with it. I am kind of cheating a little with this one in my personal experience, because I plan on having a storage shed to keep a lot of my stuff. I'm the kind of person that has a lot of interest. I tend to have a lot of different things. For example, I'm into knitting and crocheting, and I would love to have like a little area that has all my needles and all my yarn and everything organized. But I don't necessarily want that inside of my tiny house. Of course, I would be knitting and crocheting inside of my tiny house, but I would just get what I need, bring it in, work on it, and then store it somewhere else. I also am into the woodworking stuff. Like I built this deck myself. So I need a place to keep all of my like saws and just woodworking equipment. Those are the kind of things that don't go inside of a tiny house. I'm going to cheat a little bit and have a shed. You could have a shed depending on where you decide to park your tiny home. Like some tiny home parks allow sheds. Going tiny doesn't always necessarily mean completely downsizing, but for people that have a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff, where their closet is the size of my tiny house, then tiny may not be for them. But if you can manage to go with more of a minimalist lifestyle, and it doesn't have to be completely minimalist, like it doesn't have to be one set of shoes, one shirt, and one pants kind of deal. It can be somewhere in between. But if you're able to kind of downsize and declutter your surroundings, it's actually better for your mental health. An article in Psychology Today stated that if your surroundings are cluttered, then you're going to feel more cluttered mentally as well. And I can attest to this. I know that like just in my apartment, if it is not organized, then I feel cluttered. Like my brain feels cluttered. Like I can't think as clearly. And once I get it cleaned and organized, I feel like I can breathe. And I know that my Aunt Chris is watching this right now, and she is all about organization. So I know that she can attest to this as well. If you are able to minimalize things in your life, items, just stuff in your life, and go tiny, it could be better for you psychologically. Number 9. Another reason you should go tiny is you're a single person, like myself. So if you're single, whether you're a male or a female, going tiny is awesome. Like if you're already living by yourself and you don't want a roommate, oh my goodness, a tiny house, especially if you're able to pay for it in full, that is an amazing way to go because you don't have to have a roommate to help you pay bills, and you can live by yourself, and it's perfect. It's pretty awesome. And like I said, I'm not living full time in my tiny house yet, but when I am, I think I'm going to love it. I don't currently have a roommate in the apartment that I'm living in right now. I have had roommates in the past. Once you haven't had a roommate, you kind of don't want to go back. So if you're single and you've got the funds to buy yourself a tiny house and you have a place to put it that's close to where you work or you work from home, this is ideal. Like a tiny house is awesome. Okay, and reason number 10, you're retired. Living in a tiny house, whether you're single or you have a spouse and you're retired, is great because you're not going to have that mortgage payment that you're going to have to keep on paying. Because a lot of people, even when they retire, still have a mortgage payment because they've refinanced their home at least once or twice in their lifetime. If you still have a mortgage payment and you're able to sell your home and you have equity in it, you could buy a tiny house outright in full and retire with you and your spouse, or if you're solo, that's fine too. But the great thing about it, I think, for retired people is the tiny home communities. If you're like wanting to be around other people, what better place than a tiny home community? You've all got your debts paid off. You don't have a mortgage on your tiny home. You're living near other people that are most likely retired as well. I feel like a lot of tiny home parks, the majority of the people there are retired. I am making a generalization here. I definitely don't know that as a fact. That's just my observation. Now, you will have younger people living in those communities as well that work from home. I think the majority of them are retired. To be able to be retired and have a community of people around you that can help out or that you can be a part of, and you have groups like a knitting group or crochet circle that you can be a part of, or a book club, or other hobbies, fishing or hiking or whatever it is, you can form those groups in that community. And with everyone being retired, I just think that's perfect. That's just my opinion. Or you might be retired and not even want to live in a community and want to live off grid, out in the middle of the woods, kind of like where my tiny house is. Okay, so those are 10 reasons why I think you should go tiny. Going tiny is not for everybody, so keep that in mind. Really ask yourself, is this something I really want to do? Should I test it out first? Maybe rent a tiny home first, live in it for a few months or a year, see how I feel about it, see if I can truly go tiny before making that plunge and going out and buying a tiny house and saying, okay, so here I go, cold turkey, I think tiny home living is great for a lot of people. It's not for everyone, but for those people that it is good for, it is amazing. If it's something that your heart is telling you, hey, this is something I really want to do, then think about it. Sit down with yourself. Write out reasons why it would be good and reasons why it would be bad. You should always look at both sides of the coin before making a decision on something. Something I've always said, you can always try something, and if it doesn't work, do something else. So on the off chance that you buy a tiny home and you're like, you know what, this really isn't for me. I thought it was. I lived in a tiny home for a year. I thought I would be good, but I think I want to do something else now. Then just sell the tiny home. Now, I cannot say how well the resale value will be years down the road. I really don't know. I want to say that the tiny home movement is such a big thing now that it's just going to keep growing and growing, but I don't know the future. Nobody does. Will you be able to sell your home for more in the future? You might be, or you might not be. So that is a risk that you have to be willing to take. If you guys enjoyed the episode, give me a thumbs up, please. And if you are enjoying my content and you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. It helps the algorithm so much. And I really appreciate all of my subscribers. You guys are awesome. We are a growing family here. And man, I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you so much. And hey, leave a comment below if you have a tiny house, if you're thinking about going tiny, reasons why you want to go tiny, or if you went tiny and you hated it, or if you went tiny and you absolutely loved it. So yeah, let me know down below. And I do try to get to all my comments. I might not get to them right away, but be patient. I do respond to almost all of them. Pretty much all of them, for the most part. All right, that's it. I'll see you next time. I'm going to cheat a little bit with this in my particular scenario because I plan on having a storage You should always look at both